So in Dallas, what that really means is that almost 1 out of 5 folks do not have access to high-speed internet at home. So we'll launch a quick another poll here. What do you think the biggest issue that causes the digital divide is? And so there's a number of different pieces here, right? I can talk through access to devices. Can people really find them? Do they know where to get them? Access to the internet. Is their internet available in their home? Is it even, they're building appropriately wired for it? Do they even have that option? Do they know how to use the technology? Well, I mean, I wouldn't buy something that I didn't know how to use. So people that are just either scared or don't know what to do with the computer are disconnected. Affordability of devices. Computers are not cheap. I'm sure that most of y'all that are watching this are not, on a device that costs less than $200. Affordability of internet services. I don't know about you all, but I pay, $65 to $80 a month for my internet service. So that's an issue for someone when maybe that's what they have for food for the month. Um, Government regulations. They have some regulations that either promote certain internet services or restrict other ones from coming into the market. And there's a number of other things that can really happen in the to affect this issue. See if we get some of those results, but basically the answer is all of the above. So if you voted on anything, you were right. All of these are major issues that really feed into this problem, and we can definitely get into that in the Q&A a little bit more. But these are all areas, and we can have 30, 40-minute conversations on each of those alone. Um, so what do we do about it? We have one solution. So what Human IT was developed to do is we built a platform that we take in access technology as a service. So from the organizations like Georgianne mentioned earlier, we repurpose and redistribute those devices to our underserved communities. Right. This does include nonprofits. It includes schools, so on and so forth. We also work to provide access to broadband internet. So that looks like some of you may have heard of digital navigators, but that's basically someone calls us and says, "Hey, I need internet." And we can say, okay, well, in your area, we have Comcast and this provider and that provider, and they have a low cost option for you. Because we understand that there are 3 legs to the digital stool, as I mentioned earlier. Having a computer is not much unless you have internet access. And having internet access is not much unless you have a computer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then we also offer digital literacy training along with that, because that's that third piece, right? If you don't know how to use a computer, then you really the first 2 pieces aren't really that helpful. If you're just going to go on there and cruise Facebook all day, you're not really being as productive as we would like, and as you could be for yourself. And then we provide live digital support. So when we work with organizations or even households themselves, they can call us and say, "Hey, I can't get to my email. I can't get on the internet. My Wi-Fi is not working." We provide that technical support aspect of it to make sure that the people are able to use those top 3 pieces that we do provide. So we'll get into the benefits of reuse of electronics quickly, and I'm going to go back to my sustainability chart here, and we'll go through each one of these pieces and how it comes into effect when we talk about specifically electronic reuse. So number one, that social aspect, that big blue circle on top. So we distribute the devices to low-income households that don't have access otherwise, right? And some of the impact here are students with a computer report better grades, which lead to more college admissions for a number of different reasons. And we've done this survey with our own recipients. A year after getting a device, 92% of students or households with a student in them reported a grade letter increase or more. Right, so that's a huge difference, and that can mean the difference between an academic scholarship and not, honestly. Another piece of that is intrinsically, psychologically, when you're good at something, you want to keep doing it, right? So when you're being successful in school, you want to try harder. You're going to try harder. You're going to want to go to the next level of schooling, and so on and so forth. And then, what that ultimately leads to is the median earnings for someone with a bachelor's degree versus someone without is about a $25,000 difference annually. So that's a really big deal when we talk about breaking the cycle of poverty and all these other social issues that are happening today. If you look at other populations, um, oh, actually, even in the same populations, but lower hospitalization rates and healthcare costs. We work with seniors and we work with adults with disabilities, and being able to access telehealth is a big deal. Um, for people who are immobile, a lot of times going to the doctor is very difficult in and of itself, right? So, they have to, it's an endeavor to get in the wheelchair and get the correct vehicle and go to the doctor and wait and do that whole thing. So a lot of times people just don't, right? And we know that if you ignore medical issues, ultimately what will happen is you're going to have a larger medical issue, and that's going to cost you a lot more, your insurance a lot more, or potentially if you don't have insurance or the ability to pay, it's going to cost the state more. The other piece of another aspect of social is the ability to access assistance programs. So here in California, we had an issue where people weren't accessing CalFresh. And to be honest, it was a pretty big undertaking to do so. To access CalFresh without a computer, you had to go to a CalFresh office, fill out a form, wait a few hours, then they would give you another form. That second form was 38 pages long, front and back. Um, and if you didn't have one piece that you needed, maybe it's some kind of like a utility bill to verify your address. We've all been to the DMV, right? Or something along those lines. Then you have to go back home. A lot of folks maybe don't have cars, so you're on public transportation. This is something that takes a long time, and a lot of people, unfortunately, decide that it's not worth the time because they'd rather take those 6 hours of their day, not pay for childcare, and work their second job or their first job for that matter. So they don't want to take that time off to get, whatever that benefit is. Whereas on the other side, if you have access to a computer, you can just pause that right where you can save your progress, halfway through or wherever you need to go get that piece of information and come right back to it after work the next day, after work the next week, or whenever it is. And then lastly, we see the higher adoption there. The other piece of this is, you know, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, you're really touching all those pieces, right? The physiological needs, access to food and medicine, um, going up a level to safety needs, right? You can find housing, you can find a job, and then all the way to self-actualization, right? A computer and internet access is really a tool, and it's a great tool for people to use to get to the next stage in their lives. You can attend college completely online now. We've all seen those commercials for all those for all those organizations, and they can really get a job, go to college, get a job, and you can really see every level of Maslow's pyramid there that is affected. From the economic side of things, right? For users, reconditioned devices are just simply cheaper. They're more cost effective. So for example, we work with a lot of schools and a lot of schools work with Chromebooks, right? So Chromebooks, on average are somewhere between $300 and $350 brand new for a family to use at home. And reconditioned, we're looking at under $150 for the same device or a very similar device, which is important because the students have a familiarity with the devices that are provided or that they use in school. So coming home and being able to work on the same device is extremely important and helpful for them to have that. And then tech support, if you're an organization and you're purchasing devices to support your constituents, Human IT, we provide that tech support. So you can be managing your programs and ensuring that people are getting the services that you're providing, as opposed to answering the phone and helping them get connected to their Wi-Fi, right? That's another piece that saves, because ultimately staff time is very valuable, especially for nonprofits, and we know that. On the other side, for companies, right, refurbishers typically charge businesses a lot less for those types of services. I can give you an example. So a school such as the size of the University of Texas, for example, they saved about $200,000 by working with us per year. And they've been working with us for a good 6 years now. So, they're coming up on, they saved over $1 million over the course of time just by working with a nonprofit refurbisher. Smaller example, a local chain of grocery stores. So think of like HEB, something along those lines. They saved about $20,000 every year. So there's a pretty significant cost savings there that allows companies to work with us and really encourages them to do so. And they're helping their communities as well, right? Another big piece today is HIPAA compliant data destruction, right? It's HIPAA and it's DoD compliant. And that saves your IT staff a lot of time so they can perform their regular duties like getting you on your Wi-Fi and getting you online, and ensuring that all your devices work so that the workforce can be as productive as possible. And on the other side of the cost savings for this type of thing is, we're seeing these companies get fined millions and millions of dollars for improper data handling. Comcast has been hit, Target's been hit, Equifax, we all remember that breach that happened very recently. So if you are not using someone who's providing that service for you properly, then there are really issues that you can get into in that sense. And then lastly, nonprofit refurbishers, offer a charitable deduction for those items. So anything that you donate in kind to a charity or a nonprofit, you can write that off, which is great on your taxes. And then it doesn't even really get into the CSR piece and how much, especially nowadays, which is corporate social responsibility. I apologize. So when we get into that piece, that really attracts new customers. There have been lots of studies done in the past year and a half or so that are showing that 60+% of consumers will actively look to buy from a socially responsible or sustainable business, right? Sustainable product. So I think we see that number continuing to increase. There's a lot of economic benefits here just by reusing your electronics. Now, before we move into the next piece, the environmental slide, which I know this is sustainability, so like to launch that last poll and see, what are your environmental concerns? Where do the folks listening really have your concerns? Where are you active? What are you interested in? So just let us know that very quickly, and then we'll move on to that environmental piece of things. So we've got the typical ones on there, the big impact areas: water pollution, sustainable food sources, energy, just food in general. It's going to be wasting food and the waste piece of that. Products, sustainable products, which is obviously something that makes that is relevant to this conversation with electronics. And then waste and recycling, and where do our things go when we're done with them? So as you're completing that, I'll start getting into it. So what are the benefits of reuse from the environmental side? So first of all, by continuing to use devices that already exist, we don't have to manufacture new ones, right? So manufacturing a new device, a new computer specifically, will require 530 pounds of fossil fuels, which is pretty much filling up a typical car with gasoline 5 times. So think of how much power and fossil fuels that is. 300 or 3,000 pounds of water, excuse me, and then 48 pounds of toxic chemicals that are created. And that's before we even ship them, right? That's just manufacturing them overseas, right? And then you have to talk about shipping, right? That's the emission piece of that. You have those big freight liners crossing the ocean every day, and that's a significant amount of emissions there. And then you're packaging those devices, which creates unnecessary waste if those devices are already existent in the marketplace. The next piece of this is transformation of electronics back into raw materials. This takes an incredible amount of energy. It does result in additional carbon emissions as well, but think about the heat level needed to melt down some of these metals that we have in electronics, the plastics, the chemicals that have to be separated and treated in their own sustainable way. So there's a lot of things that really make a difference here in the transformation back into raw material. So we'd like to keep it in its highest best use, and I'll get to that in just a second. So alongside of that recycling piece, every single time that we recycle something down into its raw form, so melt it down into the mold, so we can put it into a mold, it's going to degrade. And this is for most materials, right? So for example is plastic. Plastics all around us. So think about your bicycle helmet or your motorcycle helmet, right? That's a very, very hard, tough plastic. Once that's recycled, it goes back into a lesser level of the plastic, right? So think about probably your computer or your mouse that you're using right now, right? That's the next level of hardness. And then after that, it comes down and maybe it'll become a plastic water bottle. And then after that water bottle is recycled, it's not going to be strong enough to go back into anything higher. So it'll ultimately be a paper bag. And once you get to the paper bag cellophane stage of things, we know that there's not really anything that can be done with it once that goes into our recycling facilities. That all being said, highest best use is very important. So we want to keep devices in their current form as long as possible to prevent that degradation, or at least delay it as long as possible. Right. So we want that helmet to be a helmet for as long as it can be. We want this computer to be a computer for as long as it can be, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, with all that, still nearly 75% of electronics find their way to landfills. Unfortunately, in landfills, there's a little bit of leaching that often occurs, right? They leak harmful chemicals into the ground. That leaches into the groundwater, and it tends to affect nearby communities. And then lastly, and unfortunately, again, there's other disposal methods. Here in the US, you don't see that very much, but in other countries, they have different ways of separating the materials. With some of them use acids to just dissolve all of the material away and leave the gold and the precious metals. Some of them just burn it in open pits. All of these solutions lead to air pollution, other health issues in the communities that are processing these. We saw a lot of this in China before 2018 when they enacted their national sword policy, and we're seeing it now in some of the parts of Africa where a lot of these devices are ending up, unfortunately. There we go. So who are we and how are we making a difference? So I'll tell you a little bit about Human IT now. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but so our mission's up there. In a nutshell, really, we don't believe that doing well and doing good have to be separate. They are not mutually exclusive. You can do both. You can do good in the world and you can be successful at the same time. We understand that this is a business, right? That's why we provide all those business services that I mentioned earlier. But it has to create an output of social good, right? We're doing all of this, all the funds that we're providing are going right back into our programs, and I'll get into that a little bit on the next piece. Diversity and inclusion is a big piece of what we do, and to us, what that really means is just opportunities to hear from people who don't normally get heard, right? It affects your community if you don't have access to things. It affects your community if you live near a landfill. It affects your community if you're living in an area that is polluted because you're right next to an oil field or whatever that is, or a refinery, right? So we want to make sure that we're taking in those voices, we're hearing those voices, and we're bringing them to the table and allowing them to really be a part of the conversation. And then environmental sustainability, I leave up there because usually I'm talking about all that social stuff, and the environmental piece is very important to us as well. Me specifically, with having gone through the sustainability program at UCLA and really understanding that this is what businesses can latch onto and what matters. We only have one planet. So a little bit about our model. So we'll talk about, this is kind of the journey of the item, right? So we take in e-waste, or what we call decommissioned assets, right? Because we don't think of it as waste typically. So we take in everything on your desk, cell phones, mice, keyboards, laptops, all of those items that will go into which we call consumer technology, and those go into our programs. Those are the items that get refurbished. Those are the items that will go back into the community. They're used for digital literacy training. They're used to just provide right out of the community and provide all these other services. The other side of it, what we call enterprise technology. So now you're talking about, your big copiers at your office, servers, MRI machines. We work a lot of hospitals. The display monitors at the airport that tell you if your flight's on time. All those types of items come in, and then we're able to monetize those by selling them again for reuse on the secondary market. And a lot of times these go to small businesses, right? A small business, it's difficult for them to afford a server, let's say, for $4,000, but they can afford one for $1,400, right? So we're really promoting the community. We work with a lot of small business associations and things like that around the country. So we're really giving them the opportunity to be successful and just lower their overhead. And then all the funds from that go right back into our programs. And that's how we're funding the tech support. That's how we're funding our call center, which provides that low-cost assistance that I mentioned earlier. And then sometimes items are really just broken and there's nothing we can do about them. And we hate it, but it's what we have to do. And we will go ahead and send those to a recycler. Think, the laptop that has the screen separated from the keyboard area, items like that. And then talk a little bit more about who we serve. I talked about what we do, but 100% of the people that we serve qualify as low income, right? So we want to create access to quality learning for all people. We qualify folks as low income through a number of different ways. Typically, we use the measures that are already in place, right? So if you're on Social Security disability insurance, if you qualify for the Lifeline program, WIC, Section 8, food assistance, free reduced price lunch, all of those types of things would qualify you for our programs. And we do work with partners who also have their own qualification methods, and we trust those that they are good. So to go on a little bit, I talked about computing devices, new and refurbished. We do have the ability to provide new devices if that's in the budget for folks. We want to make sure that we're making it affordable again. This is something that we do as opposed to some of the distributors in the world, specifically for schools, governments, and nonprofits. Right, so we work with a lot of K through 12s, community colleges like yourselves, and higher institutions of higher ed like yourselves as well. So we understand that sometimes you do need new devices, but we work very hard to make sure that we're getting them at a better price point, because ultimately they are going back to help those students. High-speed, low-cost internet connections. I talked about our internet assistance, but we also do a nationwide hotspot. And that nationwide hotspot only costs $15 a month. It has no contracts, no data caps. And so basically what happens is if you, for whatever reason, don't need the internet service for that month, or having a financial issue that prevents you from paying for it, the internet service will turn off. And then if you call or you go online and pay your bill, then it'll turn right back on. There's no issues, there's no waiting periods, nothing like that. And those are unthrottled as well. So, you can stream your YouTube videos and be on your Zoom class and do what you need to do for school or for work or whatever that is. We also offer digital literacy classes. I mentioned that earlier. Our digital literacy class is really an introductory course. There are a lot of great partners across this country who do workforce development, do coding classes, do resume workshops, and all these amazing things. But a lot of folks are not comfortable with their computer to go to those programs, right? So we have a very, very basic program that bridges that gap, right? So they learn how to use the mouse, they learn how to find their email, they learn how to get online. It's very, very basic. It's an 8-hour self-paced course, so they can take as long or as short as they want to do it, and it provides them with that baseline skill to go on to those other programs and be successful. And then lastly, we do digital support. So for example, we support all 51,000 Detroit public school students, and every device that we distribute across the country. So you have that in Detroit, you have it in Orlando, you have it in Texas, you have it wherever our devices are, and we make that available to schools and as a third party as well. So with Detroit, we didn't supply those devices. They had somebody that came in, they bought all their devices already, and then they started getting phone calls. So they worked with us to understand and supply that service for them. So, again, let us do what we do best so you can do what you do best. So their faculty, was not spending class time working on one student, getting them connected, while the other 29 or 30 students just sat there waiting. We're able to step in and help in that way. Quick highlights from the past year. We opened our second facility in Detroit. First in Detroit, second facility nationwide. Detroit was the least connected city by percentage in August 2020. We ensure student success by working with community colleges, K-12s, nonprofits, as I mentioned. We deployed over 70,000 devices alone in 2020. That doesn't even get into the internet connections. And then we partner with organizations like the California Department of Education to make our resources available to any school in California. And so we're working on doing that with magnet schools across America. We're working on doing that with the Department of Education on the federal level, and so on. And just to move forward a little bit, some of our partners, you see some of our big partners there, City of Detroit, obviously. Some of the ones that are a little bit more local to y'all in Dallas, maybe Blue Apron, the wonderful company, Wonderful Citrus is out there, Crum and Forster Insurance, and then Curves, the the gym facility. Just to give you an idea, we cross all industries. Everybody's using computers or some kind of technology in some sense. So we really do. We really are able to help in any way. And then lastly, as you all kind of go back to work and consider all these resources and how they can help you or how you can help your constituents, your students, so on and so forth, here's just a couple of ideas and a couple of ways to really sum everything up. You can access low-cost devices from Human IT. You can work with us to connect those low-income households to internet connectivity, provide tech support for your constituents or your business for that matter, that IT asset disposition and e-waste and that data destruction piece as well. So these are all ways that we can help your company, your business, your community. And I would say, just as we kind of close it out here, that we're very flexible and we provide custom solutions for our partners. We understand that even the Boys and Girls Club in Dallas and the Boys and Girls Club in San Antonio are entirely different organizations and they have very different needs. So, we work with each organization individually to make sure that we're providing the solution that works the best for them and for their constituents. And with that, I'll see what happened in our Q&A.
Okay.
I appreciate all of your time.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So my name is Sonia Ford, and I'm going to be sharing the Q&As with Adam.
Great.
Hold on a moment. Marge has a question, and her question is, do we have a percentage of students that were impacted by digital divide during the 2020 lockdown?
Is that the percentage of students for Dallas College or community colleges, or is that just more nationwide?
It wasn't specific.
Yeah, this is Georgianne. Adam, if you have a general figure, I'm sure that Dallas College has that figure, but I don't have it at my fingertips. We can look that up and pass that on. But do you happen to know kind of North Texas wide what that figure is?
Well, I do know that, we mentioned the households, and I imagine that translates down to students pretty well. So it's about 1 in 5 in the North Texas, in the greater Dallas area. We're looking at about 1 in 5, so that's about 20%. Now, I do want to point out that these folks were impacted well before the pandemic, right? This issue was always there, and the pandemic really shone a light on it. A lot of times these students, what ended up happening is they were doing all their work in the on-campus computer labs. And when the pandemic really made that impossible, they were trying to do it on their phones, and I know a lot of testing software out in the higher ed community was not compatible with a lot of the Android or iOS operating systems. So a lot of students had trouble completing their coursework, taking tests, submitting homework, things of that nature. I know that was an issue, but I think that the nationwide number is pretty representative of what we see in the greater Dallas area, which is about 1 in 5.
Okay, the next question is coming from Sarah. Sarah wants to know, what processes do you use to protect, erase, delete the donor's information from the hard drives of the donated computers?
Sure, great question. We have a number of different softwares that we use depending on the type of device, right? So wiping a cell phone is different from wiping a hard drive. We use Kill Disk is our primary form of erasure. But it's basically one of the things that happens, and I didn't get into this too much into detail, but anytime a device comes into our facility, the hard drive is removed from the device and put in a locked room, right? We have an air-gapped machine, which air-gapped means that it's never touched the internet and it never will, that can wipe 400 hard drives at one time, right? So we plug all those hard drives in there, it wipes it, it creates the report, and then it creates a certificate of destruction every single time as well. So that certificate of destruction will say what type of disk it was, what the serial number was, how big it was, did it erase, did it verify, right? And the verification that we do is think of a hard drive like a record, right? And it goes in a circle. So we, 100% from the groove from the front to the back, we make sure that we erase the whole thing, and then we run it again to verify that. And if that verification works, yes, then we consider it wiped and we send it on to its next iteration. And if it doesn't, then we physically destroy it, right? So we have an on-site crusher, and then after it's crushed, it's put into a locked bin, and then it's sent to an actual shredder, right? So data security is something that we take very importantly.
Okay. I have a question. What type of opportunities do you offer students for either service learning credit or paid jobs, internships, or even volunteer? Do you have anything set up? Is there a program that you have set up or will have set up sometime in the future to address the need of our undeserved students? That is my question.
Yeah, we do. We have we definitely have volunteer opportunities. We've done classes where, a class of, I think it was like eighth graders or so, would come in and learn how to refurbish a computer, learn what aspects to look for. This is how you can tell if the power is not working, so on and so forth. We do workshops like that. But since the pandemic started, it's been really tough to do that kind of thing. And then as far as we don't have anything virtually in place, but we do work with partners to support that. So we do provide devices for free to organizations like schools who teach those types of classes. So unfortunately, right now we don't have that capability based on how things are open and depending on which city we're in. And we also, without a footprint in certain areas, it's tough to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Adam, can you show that slide again that shows all the services Human IT provides?
Sure.
Just want to make sure folks have a chance to see that. Okay, so I guess my question is, can individuals come to Human IT, or do you have to set up programs with whole organizations? So could faculty members refer students to your program?
Yes, absolutely. So we have an online e-commerce store, and I'll put that in the chat here. So it's called Human IT Connect. This is the program that is available to the public, right? And on there, you'll see laptops starting around $110, $120, all the way up to $700, because we understand that someone who's taking an architecture course is different from someone who's taking a basic composition course, right? And they have different technology needs. So it's still going to be a lot cheaper than if you were going to get it at a Best Buy or online somewhere. But we understand that some folks need more robust machines, so we want to make sure to offer that. So on Human IT Connect, you can get access to not only that, but you can also access our wireless hotspot. So you can just go in there, you can sign up right online. There's a coverage map that you can click on, and it'll show you if your area is covered pretty good. We're running T-Mobile and Sprint, so most of the country's fine. And then you can apply for that right on there. You usually turn those around within 24 hours to get your approvals, because you will need to provide your low income proof. And there's a list of documents that will be acceptable there.
I have another question. We're having a lot of cyberspace security issues going on. Do you provide some type of security on these laptops to to ensure, to minimize hackers from getting into these computers by any chance?
So that is dependent on the organization that we're working with usually. They come with the basic antivirus that is on any computer that you buy. That comes with Windows, but nothing more robust than that. I find, and this is personal opinion, that a lot of that is the education. I talked about digital literacy training. I think online best practices in security is a big deal. Knowing where not to click, understanding what might be a phishing website, and things of that nature. I think that's definitely a hole in the digital literacy curriculum, really in every organization across the country.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Laura, did you have anything in chat?
Yeah, and I can circle back as you're looking to that, the percentage of students that were impacted. I did, after I was done speaking, we went on to the next question. I did think back to some of the community colleges specifically that we worked with. That number is obviously much higher. Here in Southern California, I spoke to one community college that was at 34%, another one that was just shy of 40%. So depending on what it looks like in your area, you can have that. And community colleges, as we know, are usually more impacted.
Yes, exactly. So I had, when that question came up, I jumped out on the internet and found that on DISD's information. So, and I do know that they are launching their own antenna. They're getting FCC approval
Mhm.
to put up their own um, Wi-Fi network, basically, in a
That's great.
predominantly underserved area. So Dallas ISD is doing a lot.
That's fantastic, and I'm glad that that's available to them because I mentioned in I think it was the last or one of the polls, but there are like regulations in a lot of states that prohibit that from happening. Governments and municipalities are not able to run their own services in that way in a lot of places. So I'm glad that that's available to Dallas.
Mhm.
And yeah, they worked out a special deal with AT&T because I'm sure it was not allowed here either. But in these extreme circumstances, you would hope that you would be able to overcome those kinds of regulatory problems.
Yes, there are.
So, Laura, was there anything else in chat?
No, ma'am, there is not.
Okay. Okay. Adam, thank you so much for sharing this information about your fabulous nonprofit with us. So thank you for joining us.